Hey guys, thanks for joining me. And if you like what you see, please subscribe.
Hello, peoples. Welcome to Sharp End. So, this is a video that's been requested a lot, and that is to kind of show some of the cutting action of some of the higher end kitchen knives that I have that I've talked about. Some of these I've reviewed, some of them I haven't. Um, but I'm going to talk about all of them. I'm mainly going to be comparing things that have like a high saber grind, a full flat grind. I'm also going to be talking about the chisel grind here on the Creely Omnivore. This is the North Arms alder. I'm also going to be talking about the convex grind that you can find on the Bark River knives, like on the Petty Z, their mini Kalahari, or their Kalahari, uh, and their bird and trout knife. And then I have another example of a flat grind here, and this is from North Arms, their bird and trout knife version. And I'm also going to show you how they actually cut using carrots and cucumbers as well. First, let me just say that if you could like, subscribe, and leave a comment, I'd really appreciate it. It's comments like, hey, can I get you to show me a comparison video or show me how the chisel grind really cuts? I'm really curious about that. That lead to videos like this and help me make content. And I really appreciate it. It also helps drive the channel and keep it going. So first off, a kitchen knife needs good geometry. A bad kitchen knife, and by that I mean a knife that you get for $10 or $5 at Bed Bath and Beyond or something like that, that has a crappy steel. If it has good geometry, it's going to cut longer. And even Dr. Laren Thomas said the most important factor in a knife being good and cutting long is the geometry. It's not the steel, and it's not the way that it's sharpened. By the very virtue of the fact that this North Arms alder, which is S35 and is beautiful and cuts very well, and I've kept it relatively sharp, um, just by the fact that it has a tall, flat, very thin stock, thin behind the edge, this is just going to process and cut things longer than a knife that's thick behind the edge, right? That makes sense. So I was curious to know or to find out. Sorry, these knives are a little cold, so they're getting a little condensation on them. I was curious about the convex grind on things like the Petty Z. Will this really, because with the convex grind, obviously we have the whole blade going down to one point, and it's a little bit thick behind the, or it can be thick behind the edge, depending on how it's ground. Is that going to cause a difference? And honestly, it does. And I'm going to show you the differences right now. Actually, before I show you the differences, let's just go ahead and name all these knives here, okay? We've got the bird and trout or mallard knife from North Arms. We have the bird and trout knife from Bark Rivers, Convex. We've got the taupe from Bark Rivers. This is the water moccasin. I really like this knife. It kind of replaces a lot of smaller paring knives for me. We have the Chisel Ground Omnivore from Creely, which has been a revelation to me. And the Chisel Ground means that it only has one bevel on one side and it's flat on the other. This is made for left-hand people too. And then we have the Alder from North Arms. It's a large cooking knife. And then we have the Petty Z, which is a small knife, very comparable to the Omnivore, obviously, also from North Rivers. And then I'm not going to talk about this right now, but I just wanted to show you also I have the Kalahari, which is more for meat rather than vegetable processing. This isn't all the high-end kitchen knives I have, but are the ones that I want to use for these examples. So I'm showing you a little bit behind the scenes here, which is basically just a messy desk with a bunch of knives on it. Um, but I thought that this angle might be easier for you guys to see some of this action. I don't know 100% about the lighting, but I'm going to try my best in this new setup. So yeah, please bear with me. So this is a Scandi grind, right? And this is very thick behind the edge, and it's used for processing things like wood and stuff like that, right? This is a great knife. I don't use this in the kitchen. You would never use this, and that's because it's much harder. Like it doesn't. I mean, it will go through the cucumber, right? But it's kind of splitting it, and it's not exact. In a camping situation, you can get away with it, but like for a carrot, I mean, it's literally chopping it in half. It actually did better there than I thought it would, but it's breaking the carrot, yeah, and that's not the best thing, right? So you want something smaller and thinner behind the edge. Something like this bird and trout knife is super, super, super thin behind the edge, yeah? And you can get very small, thin, accurate slices with this. basically you can get slices that you can see through. Yeah, sorry, can't. This new camera angle is harder for me. So this bird and trout, very nice and very easy to sharpen and keep sharp forever. Um, when we compare that to the bird and trout from Bark Rivers, it too actually makes a surprisingly very thin edge, and it's very easy to control. I find that the convex grind is actually not that bad for slicing like this. What it's doing right now, absolutely easy. However, with the carrot, it's okay because it's thinner behind the edge, and I can get a really thin cut on the carrot, surprisingly. Because this bird and trout knife is actually pretty thin, and the convex grind is done in such a way that it makes it a good kitchen knife, and the taupe as well, right? Now the taupe is actually a little bit thicker behind the edge, but it too will slice very thinly, and you can have a very controlled edge. And as far as carrots, like as it's splitting, it does split just a little bit, but that's because it's a little bit thicker behind the edge. They are slightly different thicknesses as well. The taupe is a little bit stubbier. When you have a taller grind, it's going to be a slicier knife. When it's a shorter grind in general, sometimes it's and thicker, it's going to be obviously chopping more. The exception is like when you have very thin behind the edge, all the way up thin stock, right? All right, next, let's compare something like the chisel grind. I thought that this would split things like carrots and stuff like that, but it actually is extraordinarily easy to cut things very accurately with this, and very fast too. And I found that the chisel grind works really, really well because what's happening is because the bevel's on one side and there's flat on the other, it's basically cutting the material away and making it fold over away on the other side in such a way that it consistently makes it very easy to slice through things. And as far as the carrot test goes, again, I was surprised to see that, I'm just going to split this carrot in half. It just slices through. It doesn't break it. It doesn't chop it. And you can go really fast and do very thin cuts with it. I've been very surprised how well this works. Whereas when we compare that directly with the Petty Z from Bark River, it also will do it, but it splits just a little bit because of its I don't know what it is about the grind. I mean, it works fine, it does a fine job, but there's sometimes where it splits, especially when you're going through a thicker part of a root vegetable. And the Petty Z obviously will easily and very nicely cut very thin slices, like very thin slices. See if you can see that, but you can see right through that very easily with the convex grind, as well as the omnivore, obviously. Let's see how thin I can get this cut. But yeah, also very easy to control. And then we have the full flat grind here of a giant processing knife, right? Now this the good thing about this is that you can process very big vegetables, very large things with this, right? But it has such a tall flat grind as well that it slices through basically anything very nicely. It never splits anything. It's just going to slice it as thin as you want. The problem with a larger knife like this is that you have less finesse and less control over some things. But if you go nice and slow, you can still get a very thin slice of cucumber, yeah? So, yeah. Overall, what are my conclusions? My conclusions are I'm really surprised that the chisel grind is so effective and so good at what it does. And I do recommend the Omnivore. They do make a left-handed version of this so that the grind is on the other side. I will point out, I'm saying that the bevel is only on one side. There is a very, very slight, I'm going to change the camera angle now to the top. There is a very, very slight secondary grind on the flat side to make it so sharp. But the majority of the primary bevel is on one side. But there is just a slight secondary bevel at the tip that makes it that razor sharp, because all the thickness of the blade is pushing the material that you're cutting away from the source material. it makes for a surprisingly slicey, nice little kitchen knife that is good for prepping vegetables and stuff like that. Uh, Now, this knife is not good for meat, right? The Petty Z is going to be fine for meat as well as vegetables. I can't say that for sure because I haven't tried processing meat with this, but I'm going to guess that taking things off the bone with this is going to be rather hard. Then again, if I'm taking something off the bone, I'm much more likely to go with my bird and trout, or honestly, my Kalahari, which I didn't even test, but is almost a Tonto, right? Where it swoops up and the point is higher than the hilt of the hand uh, of the scales. Um, so I'm pretty much going to be using this guy for processing meat, but I will also use things like this and my water moccasin, right? Um, so overall, I think that if a knife has the right geometry, the grind is almost secondary to the fact that it's thin behind the edge and that it's sharp, right? There are some advantages to some of these. I think an all around, both of them have, honestly, a flat ground knife in general is going to be the best all around knife that you can have. I would say, though, that the convex grind is going to be uh, fine at all around, but better at processing meat in general. Not the best necessarily, but yeah, it's great at processing meat because the way that it cuts through the meat, it kind of splits it open and moves it aside in a way I find very easy. I don't know how to describe that other than that. A chisel grind I find to be the best at processing vegetables of any sort. Of all the grinds, it seems to be the best at processing vegetables. But, and again, I haven't necessarily tested this on meat. I'm going to guess that it's not the best for meat at all. And then a very large knife like this, honestly, is starting to become obsolete for me unless I'm processing or making a giant meal and I want to go through a lot of things. This knife, which is very long, we're talking 8 inches of cutting length, is almost too much. I still love it though, and the ergos on it are great. This is from North Arms, the Alder. Whereas the Omnivore seems to be right around the perfect size, which is like 4 1/4. Petty Z, about 4 1/4. The both of these knives do a really good job, but I find myself reaching for the Omnivore, more often than the Petty Z. Maybe that's because it's newer to me, but it feels better to process vegetables, whereas this I'm reaching for more when I'm processing larger pieces of meat. And when I'm processing smaller pieces of meat, I'm usually reaching for the Kalahari or one of my bird and trout, right? As far as like the cheeses go too, I find that cheese cuts better, that the convex grind does not do so good with the cheese. I find that the flat ground is very good with cheese personally, because it sticks to the sides, right? And I have actually found that the Omnivore actually cuts cheese very nicely for thin pieces as well. So I think that's all I want to say about these knives. If you have more questions, I'd really appreciate you guys letting me know what you think about this video. And if you could like and subscribe, I'd also really appreciate that. And if you want to get entered to win a knife of the month for $3 a month, you just follow the link down below. And you will be entered to win a knife down if you become a Patreon member. Thanks so much, guys. I will see you next time on Sharp Ends. Bye-bye now.